And today we're going to go over a couple of things. So goal setting and job search is number one. This is one of our more important presentations that we go through. Obviously, the job search is going to be what you guys are going to be focused on once you are completely done with the program. But the first thing is going to be about goal setting. So you want to make sure you have your goals in mind before you start the job search, because you've probably heard me say this before, but it will become overwhelming if you don't have goals in mind. It will become stressful and you might get burnt out. So it's always good to just make sure you have all your goals in mind before you start the job search and kind of have a strategy. So these are kind of just like ways to have your goals kind of set out and figured out. So SMART goals. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely goals. So specific goals are essentially, you have more of a kind of like tunnel vision. You know exactly what you want to do. Once you start kind of spreading out, like, okay, I want to be a software developer, but I also want to be a manager and I want to go back to school at the same time. Like it starts to get a little bit like kind of into a gray area. So you want to make sure you have like specific goals in mind. Like your goal should be to get a job right now, and that's a software development job or whatever your title may be, whatever role you're trying to get, that should be your specific goal right now. So measurable. So you want to have some sort of criteria for measuring your progress toward each goal. To determine your goal is measurable, you ask questions: how much, how many, how I know when it's accomplished. So that could be anything from, how long do I want to take to get a job? What's my timeline? What's my cutoff date? How much money do I want to make? What type of company do I want to work for? So those are the type of measurable goals that we want you guys to be looking at. Achievable goals. So this one's really important. It's good to know kind of where you are right now. So a lot of you are kind of coming into this industry and this is the first time you've worked in the technology industry. That being said, you can't go out and try to find like an architect level job or a director level job or a CTO level job. You have to stick to achievable goals. So you're coming in as software engineers, focus on that. You're always going to be growing. So just make sure that you're not stressing yourself out by trying to have this unachievable goal. And we'll help you, like I said, Courtney and I are going to be here helping you guys kind of strategize on one-on-one basis and kind of figuring out what works best for everyone, each and individual person. Again, realistic goals. So eventually you're going to be looking into, going maybe into a leadership role, or if you want to lead a team or a senior engineer. But right now, kind of having some short-term goals, which is going to be finding a job, getting a job in the technology industry. You might not be able to get into these like higher level positions right now. So just make sure your goals are realistic, and you'll know on an individual basis like what your goal should be. If you have plenty of years of experience in technology world, then you may be able to do some of these mid to senior level positions. If not, you need to be realistic and start off in a junior or entry level role. And then timely goals. So it's really important, especially because you guys have been part of a program now that's pretty structured and you kind of have like a schedule for you at all times. It's important to, once you start your job search and you're basically not part of the actual classes anymore, that you have your time management skills. Like that's going to be the most important. You need to have everything measured out. So, today I want to spend this amount of time looking for a job. I want to spend this amount of time working on projects. If you're going to be TAs, that's also going to be pretty, you need to make sure you're allotting enough time in your day to job search, because at the end of the day, the TA position is great and it's going to help you, but your goal, it should still to be getting a full-time job. So you need to be allotting some time and making sure you're working your time management skills with being a TA and doing your job search, and just in general, because at the same time that you still want to have this like kind of a structure, like I'm going to be job searching at this time, you also need to know when to walk away from it and just take some time for yourself and like clear your head, because that's also going to be important. So this is kind of an important slide. So goals for the job search. Everyone's going to have their each and individual situation. So this might not apply to everyone, but just kind of in general, these are the goals you should be looking at. So trying to land a job anywhere between 90 and 180 days, so 3 to 6 months. That's the average amount of time it takes someone to find a job. It could be shorter than that. It could be longer than that. But just on average, like that's kind of the goal you should be looking at, somewhere between 90 and 180 days. I've probably told some of you this, but I know when people graduate from a project or from a program or from like getting their CS degree, their first thought is to apply to 1,000 jobs. That's not going to be efficient. And it's not probably going to yield really like successful results. So really you're trying to apply to about 4 to 5 jobs a day, probably about an hour each day applying. And the majority of the time when you're applying, so you're going to fill out the application. It shouldn't take longer than like 10 minutes. The rest of the time should be going on LinkedIn, connecting to engineers that are part of that company that happen to be in your city. It should be researching the company on Glassdoor, making sure, the reviews, and take all of those reviews with a grain of salt. So if it's on average, the reviews are pretty good, the company's probably pretty good. There's always going to be like a disgruntled employee that writes something terrible, but just make sure you're researching the company. And on Glassdoor, you can actually research what their interview process looks like. You can research what their salaries look like. So just do all of that research beforehand. That should be the bulk of your time applying. You shouldn't be applying to 1,000 different companies just blindly. And then LinkedIn connections. So you guys are going to see the more LinkedIn connections you have, the more people you can actually reach out to and the more people you can connect with. So you want to try to get upwards to 200 plus LinkedIn connections. And that might take a while. I've had LinkedIn for 5 years. So it's, I've had some time to like make some connections. I was also a recruiter for a long time. So I have like 5,000 connections, but that also took me over 5 years. So, just take your time, make sure you're connecting with the right type of people. Don't just connect with everyone. You want to make sure you're leveraging your LinkedIn connection. And the best way to do that is just to connect with people that are like-minded or people that are part of the companies you're applying to. Knowing what your salary is or what your salary is in mind for when you're joining the job market, that's going to be important. So whatever city you're in, whatever city you're looking in, you should know kind of the average salary. You can do research on that. You can just literally Google search it or on Glassdoor. But you want to know you want to have a number in mind when you're doing your job search so that you know if someone's trying to lowball you or not. And it's going to be different in each city and in each industry. Obviously, we're going to be helping you with offer negotiations and all of that. But that way, at least in your mind, like this is the goal I'm aiming for. This is the salary I'm aiming for. So you already have that in mind. So job search pro tips. A couple different routes on getting a job. So obviously usually people are aiming for the full-time position, which is going to be, normal hours like 9 to 5, 10 to 6. It's salaried, yearly salary. You do a W-2, they take out taxes for you and all of that. You usually have benefits. A lot of people will go the contract route. Usually these are temporary. So usually between like 6 and 9 months, 6 to 12 months. These could actually be independent contractors or like 1099. So in a 1099 basis, and there's like all this other stuff that goes into it. But the main thing to remember is that you probably will get paid more as a 1099 employee, but you're also having to do your own taxes. So they won't take taxes out for you. So it's usually people who do 1099s are people who've been in the industry for a while and are pretty good with like saving money and making sure their taxes are in order because you have to do your own taxes. They won't take anything out for you. So you'll get paid more up front, but then you have to remember to take all of that back because otherwise you're going to be in trouble. Sometimes contracts will have benefits included. So a third party will actually hold your contract for whatever the client is, and that third party will have benefits for you. They're not usually very great benefits. Like you'll get medical and dental, maybe vision, but they're not great benefits. So, and some contractors won't have benefits at all. So just be cognizant of that. Make sure you're asking all the right questions. I always tell people, so I have no problem with you guys working with recruiters. I know a lot of people are saying it's like frowned upon, but to me, like as long as your recruiter is telling you exactly who the client is, all of the client information, all of your project information, like it's just another person who has a set of eyes for you looking for jobs. So there's no harm in working with a recruiter. just make sure you're asking them all the right questions. Like, okay, what's the company name that I'm going to be working for? How long is the contract? What's the rate look like? What does the project look like? Asking the right questions is going to be important, and just use your gut. At the end of the day, like if you're getting a weird feeling about working with a certain recruiter, stop working with them. But I don't have any issues with anyone working with recruiters. I was a recruiter. Worked in a staffing agency. There's some really good recruiters out there. So the other type of kind of project-based is project-based, like contract or whatever, is freelance work. So a lot of people, if they want to take their time kind of getting into the job market, will do freelance work. It's a way to kind of build up your resume a little bit, make some money on the side. They're usually not full-time positions. A lot of times it's like you work 10 to 20 hours a week. It's very much like project-based. There's typically no benefits, and it's a little bit more sporadic, but it's a good way to, if you want to take your time kind of leading into the job search or leading into getting your first full-time job, to build up your resume and kind of just take your time doing that. You're still working on projects, you're still coding and all of that. It's just a little bit less time consuming. A couple other different routes that we see, especially for like junior entry-level developers, are people taking apprenticeships and internships. So in my eyes, if it was me, I would prefer a full-time position or like an actual working type position. But that being said, apprenticeships and internships can be really valuable, especially for like junior level, entry-level people. Again, an apprenticeship and an internship, both of them are going to kind of have you can take your time a little bit finding a full-time job, take up apprenticeship or internship, and you're still coding, you're still learning things, you're just taking your time, like getting that first full-time job, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you're comfortable doing. Couple different things. Apprenticeships are pretty different from internships. Typically, apprenticeships are a little bit more, you're actually coding a little bit more, you're doing more hands-on work rather than just shadowing someone. In an apprenticeship, they usually bring you on with the idea that they're going to bring you on full time. So they're essentially training you. Like they have this longer amount of time that they're training you up for the position that they're bringing you on for. An internship is a little bit different. It's usually a shorter term. A lot of times it's like mostly just shadowing, not really doing a lot of hands-on work, but you will find like good internships as well that are pretty similar to apprenticeships. The only drawback is that a lot of apprenticeships and internships are usually requiring you to be in school currently. So like they want you to be, in your junior year of college or senior year of college. So a lot of them will say that in the requirements. So just make sure you're reading through the requirements first. But like Microsoft Leap is an apprenticeship, and I've had a couple of my old Dev Bootcamp grads get into those apprenticeships, and it's going to be great. Like they're basically getting trained on their position, and then at the end of that term, they're going to be hired on full time to work that position. So there's some really good apprenticeships and internships out there. So just make sure you're, doing your research behind them. The other drawback with internships and apprenticeships is that they're usually either non-paid or they're low paying. So just be cognizant of that as well. So for your job search, and I'm actually going to send you guys kind of a bigger list of titles to look through, but I'm sure if you've kind of even just like done an intro into a job search, kind of just wanted to see what was out there, there's 1,000 different ways you can say software developer or software programmer, software engineer. There's 1,000 different titles you can look for in the tech industry, and they're all different. So these are just a few that that I've seen that people use, but I have a huge consolidated list that I can send you guys. There's probably some that are not even on that list, but it's about a list of 100 different titles you can use, because everyone's going to be stronger in certain things. So for instance, like if you working on those testing tools, if you're like, I really like doing that, you would be looking for a QA position or a software engineer and test or SDET. Those are going to be jobs that are going to be, you'll be successful in, or if you prefer front end or if you prefer back end. So there's so many different job titles that it's really going to be up to you, like what type of role you're aiming for. And that's another thing we'll be going through with you guys when we kind of do these follow-up meetings, like, okay, what's your strategy? What type of role are you looking for? But I'll send you guys kind of a bigger list of those job titles. These are just a few that we've seen have worked in the past. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is actually going to be applications versus referrals. I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed, and even with like our CS1 grads in Lambda, a few of them have gotten jobs just from referrals from Austin or one of the instructors. So referrals are probably the best way to get into a company. If you can get a referral, you're most likely going to get an interview. So then at that point, you're already kind of ahead of the curve. So referrals are going to get you in front of people faster, essentially. It doesn't mean you should stop applying and only focus on referrals. You should do both. But if you have anyone in your network that's in the technology industry or anyone you can leverage from your network to get a referral, absolutely do that. The other thing we'll talk about is on LinkedIn, when you're making these connections, a lot of times referrals, if someone refers someone to their company, they'll get paid if that person gets brought on. So it's basically like you're giving them an incentive to get paid. Like, refer me and you're going to get paid if I get brought on. So there's really no harm in anyone referring you. So if you can work that network and get a referral, that's probably the easiest route into getting an interview. So a couple of job boards and search tools. We'll be going into a little bit more detail on this depending on where you live. So when we're doing our follow-up meetings with you guys, depending on where you live, there's kind of different ones you can use. So Built-in for me, and unfortunately not a lot of you live in these cities, but Built-in for me is probably the best job board for software developers. So Built-in pulls from a lot of like startup and mid-sized companies that usually don't post on some of these bigger like Google or Glassdoor or some of the bigger job boards. So it's pulling in jobs that there's not a lot of competition for, or they're a little bit more on the progressive side. A lot of their jobs are really relevant. The way that Built-in works is very much like a very user-friendly tool. And I can show you what it looks like. And you don't have to be in these cities to be using these job boards. So if you're interested in like Austin, Boston, Chicago, Colorado, LA, NYC, you should be using Built-in. You should have alerts set up for whatever city you're interested in. Unfortunately, not every city has this. Like I still wish they had a Built-in Seattle. Some of the bigger tech cities really need to get a Built-in, but just so you guys can see an example of what that looks like. So this is Built-in. And like I said, so this is just like the main Built-in page. So depending on where you are going to be looking. So for instance, like if you're interested in Built-in Austin, you can actually create a profile on here. So like you can join Built-in Austin, you can create a profile, and it's basically like LinkedIn. There's a lot of people on here that are in the tech industry, but all the Built-ins look exactly like this. So they have their local jobs posted, they have events that are coming up, news that might be in that city. But just to show you an example, so if you want to do a job search, you can kind of be a little bit more specific. So like usually I would do early. So you're early in your career, you're looking for those type of jobs, but it posts jobs from like HomeAway. So some of these like startups or more progressive companies that are up and coming. So like data engineer, it'll post and you'll see like when those postings were put up here. So this one was like an hour ago. That one shouldn't be here because it's a senior level role, but for instance, like backend engineer, full stack developers. So there's so many jobs that Built-in posts, and you can break it up into like what level you're at. Usually it's pretty good about doing that. But yeah, so Built-in is a really cool tool for you guys to look at. The other one is, so most of you guys already know how to use Glassdoor. Glassdoor is actually a really good tool because you're already there, and once you click on a company, you can see all their stats basically. So what their interview process looks like, salaries, what some of their reviews are. You guys will actually, once you are completely done with the program, you finish out with Lambda, you graduated, you will be added to Slack channels that are, they're going to be corresponding to which cities you're interested in as far as your job search. So we have them split up into quadrants, basically, the United States. So if you're interested in Central, we have a Central job seeker Slack channel, and they're all private. So really the only people that are in those Slack channels are people that have already graduated from the program. So it's not a bunch of like just everyone in Lambda looking at these jobs. It's only people that have graduated. Courtney and I essentially post in these job Slack channels almost every day for each different area. So like we have an East Coast one, a West Coast one, Pacific Northwest, and Central. So you'll see us post, and we have job alerts, literally, I'm not even joking with you, in every state. So we will be posting quite a bit in those Slack channels. And you'll be added. You'll get an invite from us once you complete the program, the Lambda program. The other one is Google Jobs. So this is like the best tool ever invented. And I will show you how to use this. So Google Jobs is literally, you open up a new tab, a new search bar, and you would type in, so for instance, let's say Florida. So this blue box right here is Google Jobs. This is what it brings up. So Google Jobs is cool because it literally pulls from every different job board that it can find. So Dice, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, every job board it can find. It kind of pulls it into one consolidated list. Usually I'll go to date posted, do past 3 days, and bring it up that way. You never really want to look for a job or apply to a job that's been open like longer than, I would say, 7 to 10 days, because most likely they're not going to call you back, or they're already interviewing for that job and it's pretty much going to be full. So you want to try to keep your job searches for like maybe past week or past 3 days. Try to keep it as recent as possible. But even here, so like you should always make sure too. So like for instance, this one says it was open 2 days ago. Let's see if it's accurate on LinkedIn. Because sometimes it'll be different, like it's been reposted. So yeah, so LinkedIn says it was posted 9 hours ago. So you always just have to be careful and make sure you're clicking on, like trying to find it in the exact position that it was first posted. So this one was probably posted on Glassdoor first and then LinkedIn. But this is an example of Google Jobs, and you can do anything. So like it can be Florida, it can be New York, you can break it into different cities. Just make sure you're always doing, date posted, past 3 days. You can use whatever title you want, but literally it just pulls in from every job board it can find. So LinkedIn, Glassdoor. The only one it doesn't pull from that I've seen is Indeed, and that's because Indeed won't let them, because they're basically competing with Google Jobs, which is ridiculous, and they shouldn't. But yeah, so they pull in basically from everywhere else: ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, LinkedIn. So those are just a few job boards. There's 1,000 different job boards out there. I have seen a couple different ones that are like for freelance specifically too, or like for junior level positions. And I'll share those with you guys, but these are pretty much the main ones that Courtney and I will use as well to share jobs with you or to get job alerts from. So once you guys graduate from the program, you'll be added to your designated Slack channels, whichever city or I guess area you're trying to find a job, and that's the one you'll be added to. So for job trackers, so the main thing, and this kind of goes back to time management and kind of having goals. So there's many different ways you can do a job tracker. Our favorite is hunter.co. It looks like this. It's basically, it's more user-friendly, I think, but you can put the jobs that you applied to. If you've interviewed for you can add whatever columns you want to. These are just different columns. So it's important to have a job tracker because you don't want to double apply to any type of company. So like if you applied to a position a week ago, but then you don't remember that you did that and apply again, most likely that'll take you completely out of the running for that job. Like they can see that you've applied twice, and it's a red flag. So you don't ever want to do that. So you want to make sure you're tracking where you've applied to, when you applied. If it's been like 6 months plus, you can reapply. That won't do anything. But like doing it within a month or 2 months time, reapplying to a job it was always a bad look. It's a red flag. So you want to make sure you're tracking where you've applied, what type of position you applied to. The other thing that you can add to this Hunter board is contacts. So if you applied a Lyft, you would try to go on LinkedIn and find a Lyft lead developer or software engineer in your city. And then you would reach out to them on LinkedIn and connect with them that way. And then you would mark that down, and just make sure you're keeping track of that as well, because a lot of times when you send these connections, you won't be paying attention to if they've actually connected with you or not. So you're just waiting for them to send you a message. Sometimes they won't. So even if you're a connection with them and they haven't sent you anything back, you can then email them, because now you're connections, and send them a little bit of a longer message, and then they'll be able to see that message directly. So just making sure you're keeping track of like where you applied, when, and who you're reaching out to. And then everything else, like if you want to start setting up like, okay, I've interviewed with this company, I got rejected from this company, whatever the case may be. But Hunter is the one we always prefer. You must have a job tracker. We want to make sure that you're keeping track of it. And we want you guys to share them with us so we can help you out the best we can. But you can use Hunter, you can use a spreadsheet. It's however you want to do it. But this is just like a little bit. So this one's heard about company from, or like you can do whatever columns you want. Just make sure you're making sure you have when you applied, what company, what position, and if you reached out to anyone, if you've like gotten in contact with anybody from the company. So like I said, the best way a lot of people will just not follow up. You should be following up no matter what you do. So if you're following up with a contact from the company, if you haven't heard from them, if you've interviewed and you haven't heard from the people you interviewed with, follow up. So being persistent is key, because there's so much competition in this industry, and there's going to be so much competition for the jobs you're applying to, that you want to stick out. You want to make sure people remember you. Obviously don't be persistent to the point where you're annoying people, but you want to be persistent on making sure you follow up with like feedback, and, making sure if you message someone, they message you back. I typically tell people to if you message like a recruiter or a developer, give them a week. If they haven't responded to you in a week, reach out again, but don't do it like before that. Don't do it in 2 to 3 days. Like give them some time to respond, to look at it. But typically within a week, like 6 or 7 days. Okay, I'm going to stop there before we get into the next presentation. Does anybody have any questions on what we just talked about?
Yeah, so if I'm like applying to a job in like a different city, coming from a different city, would you say that my chances are a lot lower compared to the other people that are local?
No. So I think I've mentioned this to most of you guys, but if you're going to be looking in another city, you just leave your address off of your resume. So it sounds weird, but basically you don't want to get caught with the gatekeeper of having a different address than the city you're applying to. So for instance, like if you're in Austin and you're applying to jobs in New York, you don't want to have Austin on your resume. You just don't have any location on your resume. And then when they call you and they're like, hey, we're really interested in your resume, where are you currently located? You can say, oh, I'm actually in the process of relocating to New York, and just keep it at that. And if they dig into it deeper, you can say, yeah, I'm currently in Austin. I've been looking to move to New York, whatever the case may be. And that might throw you out of the running, but most likely it won't. A lot of software industry, a lot of software companies will relocate you, especially if you're like their best candidate. But that being said, it's hard to get through the first gatekeeper if you don't have the city that you're trying to look in on your resume, or like if you have a different city. So you don't want to have any city on your resume really, if you're like trying to relocate at all. But it shouldn't take away your chances. Like if you're the best candidate, you're the best candidate. Most companies will relocate you. Anyone else? Any other questions about job search techniques? No? Okay. We can go over questions at the end of both presentations anyways, but so the next one, our next presentation, actually, start at the beginning. So cold outreach and informational interviews. So the best way, we were talking about this before, to get in front of a company, in front of the recruiter, in front of the hiring manager is via a referral. So how do you get a referral? Sometimes you already know these people. A lot of times it's new connections that you're making. With all of the credentials that you have on your resume and your LinkedIn now, you should be getting some more, I would say you should be getting some more connections than you were getting in the past. So now that you're going to have Lambda on your LinkedIn, you're going to have some projects on your resume, some experience, you should be able to kind of leverage that and get some connections on LinkedIn. And through those connections, you should be getting some referrals. So this presentation is more about like cold outreach and like networking, informational interviews. So cold outreach is essentially you reaching out to someone that you don't know. So a lot of you, basically cold outreach is going to be what you're doing when you apply to a position. You're going to apply to that role. You're going to find a developer or a lead engineer. It's usually better to try to find someone on the development team that you're reaching out to, because they're most likely going to be the ones who are connecting back with you. For instance, Courtney and I, when we reach out to employers, we usually reach out to the recruiting side of the house, or like talent acquisition, because we work on that side of the house. So try to stick to like developers. Even if you want to go higher up, like software engineer or software directors, software engineering directors, that works too. But usually like just connecting with a developer will do. So cold email outreach. So this is a little bit different. So back in the day, everyone sent emails all the time. A lot of times it's now a little bit harder to find like individuals' emails. But that being said, the email is probably the best route. So LinkedIn is great, and some people use LinkedIn, some people don't. Some people check their LinkedIn, some people don't, but everyone checks their email. So if you can find an email, that's probably the best route to go for like an outreach. I don't recommend like calling a company directly or trying to call someone's number directly to try to get a cold outreach. Like that's a phone call is a little bit of a warmer connection. I wouldn't do that right off the bat. I think it might freak people out. So it's always best to kind of intro yourself with an email or a LinkedIn message. But it's a great way to, I guess, get an intro to this person, to the company. Keep it short. So I know I'm sure some of you heard me say this, but I always say keep it short and sweet. So on LinkedIn, when you're adding your note, so you have to always add a note before you connect. It'll always pop up a box that says send connection directly, or it'll say send now, or it'll say add a note. You always want to add a note. You don't just want to send a blank connection. So in your note, it usually should go something along the lines of, hi, blank person. I'm very interested in your company. I was looking at the software development role. I'd love to connect with you and chat about the role, maybe get some more details. However you want to say it, just keep it short and sweet. Thank you, send the connection. That being said, so that connection note, sometimes people see it, sometimes people don't. So if that person connects with you, resend them an email. So send them an actual email. So that's going to be basically like an email directly to their inbox. That one can be longer than you want it to. Like it can be longer than a brief message. It can be like, hey, this is my story. I work at Lambda. Here's my resume, basically. So you always want to make sure that even if you send a connection and someone connects with you, they might not send you a message right away. So send them an email, follow up with an email. So cool. Like what if they do want to meet with you? Keep it casual. These meetings you shouldn't be bombarding them with a bunch of questions about getting hired. So these meetings, especially because you guys most likely are going to be reaching out to other developers, these meetings are going to be mostly about like asking about the culture of the company, and like, hey, like you can even talk about like, oh, how did you get into this industry? Or like, how's it been working for, in the technology industry? What have you seen? What have been your obstacles? So keep it really casual. Like you want to try to form more of a friendly connection with these people, rather than saying like, hey, how do I get hired into this company? Like it's a little aggressive, and I wouldn't do that. So how do you do cold outreach? So sometimes someone from your network can be like, hey, I can introduce you to this person who works at HomeAway. Perfect. So if you're introduced, obviously address the person you've been introduced to and be friendly. Like, oh, hi, very nice to meet you. So glad we're connected. Always thank the person that introduced you. So like if one of your instructors, or Courtney and I, or Austin introduces you to one of our referrals, make sure you're saying, and it's not for us. We don't need you to thank us. It's more so that person can see like, okay, this person's professional and friendly. Thank you for introducing me, blah, blah, blah. So you can ask for coffee, phone call, basically ask for a meeting. So typically the coffee meetings is more for a warm connection, but if you're being introduced, that's a little bit of more of a warm connection. So if like somebody that is introducing you to someone else, that's more of a warm connection. And it's okay to be like, hey, like I'd love to just grab some coffee sometime and kind of, talk a little bit about the company and what you've been looking at as far as the industry and what you guys are looking at to hire someone. But that's really only in the situation would you like kind of sit down and ask for a meeting like that. Otherwise, you can say, hey, do you mind like jumping on a call? I just, I have a couple questions. I'd love to get your advice. Or even like via email, if you can tell that that person's like, I don't have time for a phone call, like I'll answer your questions via email, feel free to have a conversation with them via email. Like that's not going to do anything. So this is more on the networking side. So if you haven't been introduced to somebody and you're still trying to like leverage some and gain a network. So a lot of you in your specific cities haven't necessarily like been in the tech industry. So one way to kind of find some of these like-minded people and find these technology events is by going to Eventbrite, Meetup, looking at what tech events are in your area. The best way to meet someone is in person. You're going to hear me say this a million times. The best way for someone to remember your face is going to be in person, for them to see your face. So that being said, these meetups, and it doesn't have to be like a job fair or anything like that. It can be a hackathon. It can be an event where you go and you're just literally coding with a bunch of other people. There's always going to be a way to network in the technology industry via these meetups. So, for instance, if you wanted to go to like a Python meetup, a lot of those people are going just to like brush up on their Python skills. They may already be working in the industry. They may be, leads or hiring managers in the industry. So just talk to people. They're all like-minded. They're all developers. They are all there to code and to just meet other people in their network. So don't be afraid to strike up a conversation with them. Even at hackathons, I don't know if any of you have been to any hackathons, but a lot of times they will say, okay, like they'll intro the hackathon, like this is what we're going to be doing today. This is what we're going to be teaching you guys. This is the project we're working on. But then they'll say, we also have blah, blah, blah as our sponsor. They're actually hiring. Come talk to them after the event. Or they'll bring people up and say, these are job seekers at some of these events. So there's just so many different avenues that you can go into to meet people like in person in your individual cities. Now, obviously, if you're not looking within the city that you're living, that's a little bit harder. But you can still do that via LinkedIn. You can still find people in the cities that you're looking. So like if you're looking for jobs in New York, you want to try to find software developers for the companies you apply to that are in New York, and just see like what the environment is and see if they connect with you, if they're chatting with you. So you can still do that via LinkedIn if it's more of like you're not in the actual city. But if you can, I would definitely try to go like join meetups and join Eventbrite, and you can set alerts to like when they have events coming up. Like for instance, Courtney and I are probably going to try to start putting some more events in the job seekers channels as well. Just for some of the bigger cities, like most of the bigger cities have events, like weekly events you can go to. But even if it's just like Girls Who Code or like just random ones that are not really job seeking type of events, it's still a good way to go and network and just see who's in the industry, like talk to people. It's a good, and then they'll remember your face. So informational interviews. So informational interviews are a little bit different. It's not just it's a little bit more than a casual conversation. It's less about like, hey, like tell me a little bit about, what your obstacles have been. It's more about, this is you trying to get a job. But it's very specific. Like you can't be aggressive in these informational interviews. These people are taking the time to talk to you. These are just cold connections that you've reached out to, that you've formed a connection with now, but you don't want to scare them away. So informational interviews are kind of a way to kind of get yourself into like, hey, I'm, looking for a job in your company without being super aggressive. So make sure the informational interviews, it's, when you're setting these up, and can be any way, like you can go and talk to these people via LinkedIn. Like once you've connected with them and you're sending an email, you can say, hey, like I'd really like to meet up. Like, thank you for answering my questions. You sound like you have some great advice. If you ever have time, I'd love to meet up for a coffee and just kind of talk a little bit about the industry and your company, blah, blah, blah. So once that happens, if they're like, yeah, totally, let's do it. Make sure you pick, a date and time that's convenient for them. Make sure you have your questions in mind that you're going to ask them already. And then obviously, with those questions, like you don't want to send those via the message. You kind of just want to like set an outline for the conversation. So mostly like, hey, I'd love to get coffee and chat about, what it looks like to be a developer in your company, or what your team looks like, what's the culture like in the company. So kind of just like have an outline and then have your questions prepared. So when you do actually meet with this person, you're not like just sitting there blabbering about nothing. You have clear and concise questions. You're not wasting their time. That way you can get the most information out of them as possible, without like wasting anybody's time, yours or theirs. Some do's and don'ts for informational interviews. So obviously when you're doing an informational interview and you're meeting with this person, do your research. You've already kind of looked into their LinkedIn profile. You've already met them briefly if you met them at like a meetup. So you kind of know what their personality is like a little bit, but do your research. Look into the company that they are at. Look into some of their prior positions, or into like what school they went to. Have something that kind of is relatable in your conversation to keep it pretty casual and warm, but be respectful of their time. Like I said before, like a lot of them are developers as well. They don't have a lot of time to just sit around and like chat with you. So make sure, if it's a 30-minute conversation, make sure you keep it at 30 minutes and you're not just starting to like go off on tangents about things that are not relevant. Always follow up. You're going to hear me say this 1,000 times. Follow up with them. Thank you so much for meeting with me. This has been so great. I'd love to do it again sometime if you're, when you're not busy or whatever. Always follow up with them. So don't ask for a job. Like I said, this is not a place to be aggressive. There's a tactful way of kind of implying that you're obviously looking at the company, looking at working there, but don't straight up ask for a job. It's very aggressive. You're going to scare them away. They're going to be like, okay, relax, person. Also, don't rant about yourself. This also goes into being cognizant of their time and their availability. So you don't want to start going off into tangents. You want to have like basically an outline that you're going to go through, or questions that you're going to ask already in mind when you meet with this person. So we'll send you this article, but it's essentially kind of 3 steps to a perfect informational interview. It's just things to do, that how you get an informational interview, like how to approach getting one, how you act when you're in an informational interview, and how to follow up. But it's a pretty good article. That's it on informational interviews. So that's pretty much, that slide was about networking and kind of just trying to gain some network to gain referrals. Did anyone have any questions around that? No? Just real quick, so I want to show you guys what I mean. Some people have used LinkedIn, some people haven't, so it's good to just always like check. So for instance, like I'll just find somebody. So when you're searching for somebody and you're like, hey, I really want to like reach out to this person, this is what I mean by connecting with them. So say you're like, oh, I really want to reach out to John Smith, Director of Engineering. Connect with them, but always add a note. So see how you can do like a send now? You don't want to do that because then you can't add anything. You want to add a note, and it would be like, hi, John. Wanted to touch base. I am very interested. Obviously use correct grammar, and working for, company, blank company. I have heard great things. Love to connect to get your advice. Thanks. And then send it that way. Very short and sweet. You only have you have a character limit that you can do anyway, so you can't really have a long message. So just make sure you're getting straight to the point. Like you're interested in working in a company, and you'd love to get, so you always want to hype people up, right? You don't want to ever say like, I'm really interested in your company, hire me. You would say, I'm really interested in your company. I was hoping I could get some like sagely advice from you, or, some additional details that you might know, because he's the head of engineering. So you always want to try to hype people up a little bit, kind of stroke their ego. That's always going to yield some good results. But so then once John Smith connects with you or whatever, you can then send him an email. So some of you guys will see, like I can send emails pretty much to whoever I want. Well, so yeah, I have no email credits left, but usually I can send them to whoever because I have a premium account, but you guys don't need to get that. I don't recommend you buying any additional subscriptions for LinkedIn. Just have the basic LinkedIn, because once you're connected with them, you can email them whoever you want to. So like you can send them a message, and this one doesn't have a character limit. So you can send whatever you want, and you can actually add, this won't show me, but you can add, like you can upload your resume here, or like upload a website or whatever you want to do. So that's a little bit about that. But yeah, just using LinkedIn in general, it's going to be, you're going to see it's a really good tool for networking. It's a good tool for job search. You don't need to have a premium account. The only reason we have the premium account is to reach out to employers to try to get some jobs for you guys. So you guys don't really need that. Like this is, LinkedIn is the place for you to network and connect with people. And like I said, your job search, your actual applications, those shouldn't take that much. They shouldn't take an hour a day. Your applications usually are like 10 minutes long or less. So you fill out the application, you spend the majority of the time researching that company. Before you fill out the application, make sure you want to work there. Research the company, look at the reviews on Glassdoor, look at the salaries, the interview information. If you're still interested, apply, and then go to LinkedIn and try to connect with someone. Either like I said, even if you want to go higher up, you can do director of engineering. You could do just a lead software engineer or a regular software engineer, but try to find someone that's in the city that you're interested in for that company. But yeah, that's going to be, and you'll see like once you start gaining some more connections on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see more people. It's just the way it works. But yeah, that's about it for networking and job search tools. We're going to be working with you guys on an individual basis. Not all of these techniques are going to work for everyone. So everyone's going to have their own technique. So that's what Courtney and I are going to be doing with you guys after you graduate. We're going to be working with you on kind of set up your strategy, what job search tools are going to work best for you, which job tracker is going to work best for you. We just ask that you share whatever job tracker you use with us. But yeah, does anybody have any questions around any of that?
Yeah, so there's like a couple of jobs that I saved towards LinkedIn, and some of them are like past like 30 days. Would you say that some of those are like too late to apply to, or do still have a chance to apply?
I mean, if it's past 30 days, most likely they've already picked a candidate and they're going to be bringing them on, or they're like in final interview stages. So the typical job cycle is about 30 days long, right? So, but it only takes them about the first 2 weeks to find their candidates. The rest of the time is interviewing and offer stage. So that's why if it's anything past like, I would say 10 days max, or like maybe 14 days maximum, I wouldn't bother applying. Like, okay, so I don't want to say that's a guarantee. They might reach out to you. You might have the 1 in a million who's like, oh yeah, we've been looking for someone forever. You're perfect. You're hired. But most likely they probably won't ever reach back out to you, and your resume is just going to go into space. So I would say anything from like 14 days or less is probably your best bet.
Cool, thanks.
Anybody else? So that is it for today, you guys. Tomorrow we're doing the other one?
No.
Okay. So next week, I know you guys are wrapping up on Friday, but next week we're actually going to be doing one more workshop, and it's another really important one. It's the actual like nailing the interview, so some interview techniques. So hopefully all of you can join. It's going to be next Thursday. But following that, and kind of the next few weeks, the next few months, honestly, Courtney and I are here you should be meeting with us. So whoever you met with for your one-on-one, that's who your designated career coach is. You should be meeting with us to be going over, how to get started on your job search strategy, everything along those lines. And also showing us your final resumes if you haven't already. We definitely need the resume is going to be the first thing. So you got to get your resume in check and your LinkedIn in check before you start your job search. But following up with us is going to be important. We're going to be helping you out and adding you to the Slack channels, whichever Slack channels, the job seekers channels that you're interested in. So we have Central, East, West, and Pacific Northwest. So talk to us, let us know kind of where you're kind of aiming your search, what cities you're aiming your search. and we'll get you in the right Slack channels. And we'll also be following up on job search techniques and what boards to use and things like that. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We will talk to you. You'll hear us again next week, but feel free to, like I said, book time with us. We're your career coaches now officially. So, yeah, finish up this week with Lambda. Get excited for your job search. Bye, everyone.